I'm getting chills.
So they did a CT scan and they had found multiple perforations in my ascending colon. And so they're like, listen, we need to get you into surgery immediately because like if you didn't get here in time, you probably would have had an ostomy bag and you probably could have died because
Oh my God, that's serious. So I think this is a great topic right now that we're starting with. I believe personally, like a lot of people that I know, just on daily basis, I see neighbors, friends, people I'm engaging, resource, I will say, how someone can have this awareness first that something is not right with their body. Like, what would you say, like top 3 symptoms where you will say like, okay, you need to do something. If you're not gonna do that, is eventually gonna lead somewhere to some autoimmune disorder or some serious health issues eventually along the line. Like,
so typically how it'll manifest with regards to symptoms, low energy is huge because what happens is your red blood cells and hemoglobin, they're responsible for carrying oxygen to your cells. So 90% of your waking energy actually comes from more oxygen. So if you can deliver more oxygen to your bloodstream and to your cells, you actually have more energy. It also helps to reduce brain fog. So brain fog is another symptom of that as well. Because if you can deliver more oxygen to your brain, the better your cognitive function is. And also sleep as well, because when you sleep, that's when you repair and recover. And even if you didn't have sleep apnea, let's say, or physical obstruction in the airway, if you don't have enough red blood cells and hemoglobin to carry the oxygen to your cells, then your body can't repair and recover properly. So how that typically manifests is that individual will toss and turn more frequently because their body is trying to find a better position to inhale more oxygen. And
okay.
obviously they can't get that really deep restorative sleep that they need.
Sleep is big one. It's big, and low energy. Everybody on caffeine. Everybody on caffeine. For someone, if they are aware that they have those symptoms, what will be like a few steps that they could change on a daily basis?
Well, typically it all starts with hormones. So typically that pathway is vitamin D3. D3 actually helps with the creation of hemoglobin. So if you can increase hemoglobin production, that will help with higher oxygen carrying capacity, which will lead to more waking energy, less brain fog, better sleep. It also has to do with, the certain sex hormones. So specifically DHEA, testosterone. And, even for women, women are like, wait, why do I need testosterone? I'm like, well, testosterone in a woman's body still helps with building muscle, burning fat. It helps with signaling their bone marrow to create more red blood cells and hemoglobin, which will lead to more oxygen carrying capacity, which will lead to more waking energy, less brain fog, better sleep. It'll help with libido and even like a higher sense of confidence and drive and ambition in a way as well. Because what happens is, I call testosterone one of the 3 pillars of the fountain of youth, because what happens with all 3 of these pillars is they all decrease as you get older. And our philosophy is if you just replace the levels you had when you were younger, let's say in your early 20s for all 3 of those, right, you're going to feel a lot like you did back at that age. But the challenge is with, most traditional allopathic disciplines, they don't look at it that way. They, like I said, normalize aging, right? Where it's like, okay, you're supposed to feel that.
Yeah.
Fine, like you don't have to. But again, they just don't look at it that way because, their philosophy is all about diagnosing a cluster of symptoms. And then they automatically think, what am I going to prescribe to address or mask those symptoms? Versus the better question is, hey, what's really the root cause of the symptom? Because by just prescribing a pharmaceutical, they're not addressing root cause. So then you become an annuity for the pharmaceutical company because you have to remain on their pharmaceuticals forever because you've never addressed the root cause.
Right.
So our philosophy is, hey, if we address the root cause, then we eliminate the chronic issue because, again, once you address root cause, then it goes away. But obviously, it was what gives us the opportunity to really, create, an incredible business as well.
Yeah, just like I remember when I was sick. And the endocrinologist, I probably went to maybe 3, 4, and they say just take, pill and thyroid and that's it. And I remember I asked one endocrinologist, and he was with the most experience that he was recommended, that he had 40 years of experience. And I asked him, I say, do you think nutrition, at that moment, I had no idea, nothing about, just like a pill. And already my awareness was in my head, wait, I'm going to ask about nutrition. I said, does nutrition have any impact on that, at all? And he's like, no. And I said, what about stress? He's like, yeah, a little bit, but here's it's a normal to be stressed. And I left the office and I was like, something in my gut, I just don't feel that this is the right answer. So anyways, crazy. So tell us about your story. I know you have an incredible story, and this is why you do. And probably this is how we're going to know who you are. Who is Ben Lee?
Yeah, so last year in June, I experienced a healthcare challenge myself, and it literally came out of nowhere. So I had 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, and I should have done it in my early 20s. I just didn't do it for whatever reason because, you just procrastinate. But then I finally ended up doing it, and I had two impacted teeth, which means they were sideways, and the surgeon had to basically break them apart within there and then cut out pieces and pull them out. That was a Friday morning. Everything was great until Wednesday, and then all of a sudden my mouth just started radiating in pain, and I took the painkillers that they gave me and nothing was working. So I called the surgeon back. I'm like, listen, I'm like, my mouth and my brain hurt, because anytime you have any type of mouth pain, it literally hits your brainstem and it's the most uncomfortable experience. And so he told me to take 12 Advil and Tylenol every single day. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's safe. They're over the counter. Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue whatsoever. But then what happened literally a week later was I developed diverticulitis. So I was literally in the Keys. I was in Islamorada on vacation with, my parents and my fiance's parents. They were actually meeting for the first time. And, we got there, I think it was Wednesday. So it was the four of us. So my parents, my fiance, and myself, we got there, had happy hour, we're on the beach, enjoying a beautiful sunset. Everything was perfect. And even the next day I woke up, I was fine, had no issues. And then I had a cup of coffee on an empty stomach and a phone call, a conference call. And then my stomach just started not feeling great. And I was like, okay, well, that, I'm like, there's something off or whatever it is, but I'm fine. And then I have these Japanese pills that normally knock out anything. Most amazing, stomach pills you can get. And I took a bunch of those, didn't do anything. I took Pepto, I took Mylanta, and my stomach was just upset all day. Woke up the next morning, and through that entire night, I was going to the bathroom all night. I just my stomach was upset, and I was like, okay, well, that's not good. And then the next morning I woke up, still had some pain, and then my fiance was like, oh, you should eat an apple because it might be a peptic ulcer, so that could help. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do whatever. So I took a bite, and then that's where it really started hurting, where it felt like I had an open wound in my stomach and somebody was pouring salt. That's how painful it was. So we got packed up and we drove from Islamorada all the way back up to Hollywood. That's where her parents live, and they live right next to Memorial Regional. So that had been an hour and a half. And by that time, I felt every little bump, every little crevice, every time she slammed on the brake, every time she slammed on the gas, I was like, oh my God, I'm just get me to a hospital. Oh my God. So we ended up at the Memorial Regional ER around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And, they checked me in immediately because, I was in so much pain. And, they gave me morphine. It didn't even work.
Oh, wow.
It didn't even do a lick. So then they gave me Toradol and Dilaudid on top of that. And then I felt like a normal human being again, where I wasn't in pain. So they did a CT scan and they had found multiple perforations in my ascending colon. And so they're like, listen, we need to get you into surgery immediately. Because if you didn't get here in time, you probably would have had an ostomy bag and you probably could have died.
Oh my God, that's serious.
Yeah, because what happens is, your intestines and your colon, they're a closed system. If there's a perforation, then that means fecal matter gets into your abdominal cavity, and that can turn into sepsis, and obviously you die from it. So,
shoot.
They had me in the operating room by 9 p.m.
Wow, I'm getting chills.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I wish there was a resource. I could have done research because, again, it was an emergency situation. So you can't do much research about it. But I wish I would have asked the surgeon, hey, how many sets of sutures are you going to utilize to reattach each layer of abdominal tissue? Because I think what happened was, I think they reattached certain layers together. And now, every time I get out of bed on the left side, my left erectus muscle spasms. I spent over tens of thousands of dollars out of my own pocket because, I went to physical therapy for 3 months, 10 sessions. They're like, we can't do anything more for you. I'm like, okay, waste my time. But I've had to search for other more alternative treatment modalities to be able to, to kind of work through this. So myofascial release, shockwave therapy, Electrons Plus, working with, chiropractors and providers that have a better knowledge of the whole biomechanical chain. Because talking about root cause, if there's, something that you're feeling or pain that you're feeling from a musculoskeletal perspective, it's probably due to another area that's locked up. Because if your muscles or whatever lock, then it doesn't allow for the biomechanical chain to fire properly. And then things start to overcompensate, and that's where typically pain arises. So unless you have somebody that can identify and address that specific root cause of that biomechanical chain issue, then you're always going to experience that. That's the stuff that I've been going through. And, through that entire process, it was extremely difficult for me to even advocate for myself. And again, I'm not your normal patient because, I probably know more about the human body than most people on the planet. And, that's not, not trying to say that in a boastful manner, but, again, this is what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And I have 4 physicians in my family. I have plastic surgery, anesthesiology, emergency medicine, pediatrics, with very diverse, backgrounds. My fiance works for Optum, which is part of United Healthcare, which is the largest health insurance platform in the world. They make over $400 billion every single year. And I still couldn't probably advocate for myself because obviously, when you're in massive pain, right, you're just loopy, right? You can't really, think straight. And then, after the surgery, when I was in recovery, instead of allowing me to sleep every, like all night, like for 8-10 hours, because that's actually how you repair and recover, they would wake me up every 2 hours to take my vital. I'm like, listen, if I'm not dying, like if I'm not coding, don't wake me up, because if I just sleep, I'm going to, repair and recover faster and get out of here faster. And, I had my Oura ring on and I was only getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep every single night. I was like, there's no way in hell I could recover and get out of here faster if I'm only getting 3 hours of sleep every single night. And then what they would do is at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, they would just barge in my room, turn on the lights. And then I'd be like, what the hell's going on? Because again, like I said, I was only getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And then I would stare at the foot of my bed and there's 10 people staring back at me. And then they're like, hey, we're going to do all this fun stuff to you all day. You got any questions? And you're like, wait a minute. I'm like, I just woke up out of a dead sleep. Like I still got drool and like eye crusties and everywhere. I'm like, how can I have an intelligent conversation with you? Like out of a dead sleep. And again, they want to get out of that room as quickly as possible because they want to get through the rounds and just get, done and on with their day, unless you're fully prepared. Like if you've written down every single thing that you had a question about or concern in the last 24 hours, you're not going to be able to connect with them for another 24 hours.
Yeah.
And the time that they do it, it's not even visiting hours. So you're there by yourself. So, like I said, it was very, very difficult for me to properly advocate for myself. And, through that experience, like I realized that if I can't properly advocate for myself with all of my, expertise, tools, and resources, well, what about somebody else that has none of that?
Yeah.
They're by themselves. So that's why, I built a platform called LEAP. That's the Lab Education and Advocacy platform that will allow anybody in the world to upload lab results, and it'll actually populate educational videos, frequently asked questions based on that individual's labs. So it'll change as their lab results change and whatnot. What I started to realize was, unless you have some base level of education, you cannot properly advocate for yourself at all. And like I said, most physicians, I'm not saying all, they just don't have the time, the resources, the bandwidth to sit down and walk you through every little thing. They're just going to say, hey, listen, like we're the experts, just listen to us. I think that's what they want, right? Versus, somebody that can ask questions and say, hey, well, is there a better option than that? Or, hey, what about this and this, right? If you don't even know what to ask, right, you're just going to get railroaded through the system. So, that's where, LEAP comes into play. And, we're really excited about that because, that'll really at least give people a fighting chance, to be able to properly advocate for themselves. Because again, no one's going to advocate more for your own health than you are.
Yeah. So is that the page the same as 4BPM?
So 4BPM is our virtual clinic. Yeah. So LEAP is our platform. And, the great thing about LEAP is, we can actually white label it. So we can, provide it to other providers that'll actually help them to really improve their own practice, because what we can do is we pre-educate their patients. So obviously a higher, educated, higher quality patient is going to ask better questions versus asking the really menial kind of like, hey, really, why are you asking this question kind of deal, right? And, that'll actually improve the quality of their consults, and they don't have to waste as much time either. And, from a patient perspective, they're going to gain a lot more knowledge about their body, because if you think about it, 99% of the planet has no idea what's happening in here. And if you don't understand the process occurring in here, how in the hell can you make educated decisions on your health, your wellness, your diet, your lifestyle?
Yeah.
So education is really, the first thing you need to do. Like you said, awareness, right? If you're not even aware of it, how can you educate yourself? So really our mission is to help educate and empower people to take control of their health and wellness, but to also properly advocate for themselves when they're going through, health challenges as well.
Yeah, advocate. Thank you for sharing. I think this is where we're going right now. It's amazing. Advocating for yourself, it's so important. I remember when I got pregnant, and I'm like blessed. God blessed me with awareness and with intuition. And I believe women are already naturally more intuitive than guys. And when I got pregnant, and I had no understanding what was happening in the hospitals, birthing home. I'm like, immediately I said to my boyfriend at that time, I'm like, I'm not birthing in a hospital. And the more research I started doing, the more I realized the delayed cord clamping, all these shots that they give. And it's like, also they come in like, mom just gave a birth. Some of us had a 2nd degree tear. I birthed in the birthing home, but I still did tear. I think if I was birthing in a hospital, they would have done C-section immediately, because there was something that my baby was kind of like coming out with the arm like that. And I had two very experienced midwives. They kind of made me do all kind of weird exercises and movements that the baby just came out, I just tore, but everything else was fine. And it's just like that awareness to have, especially for women that are birthing children. That's like the closest to the death that I've been, that experience. Like it's insane. And to have that awareness, to have that understanding that children are actually much healthier that are born at home, outside of the hospital, in the birthing home or at home, when you learn this proper birthing experience in advance from mothers that they did birth their children at home. It's like my baby's 14 months old, so healthy, never been sick, no any jabs, like amazing. It's like also right now it's like almost 50% of the worldwide women have a C-section. Money in the hospitals, quick, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. It's like how where can people, all of us can have this awareness, how to find that awareness and how to understand it. Like a healthcare right now is not a healthcare, it's a sick care. And there are generally a good doctors that they want you to be better. But I do believe and this is like, we can go down this rabbit hole that like, and who is actually sponsoring and paying for all these case studies and everything? Like, can you tell us about your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, because, I always...
Because we're such a sick nation, especially in USA. I'm from Europe. I spent half of my life now in Europe and in USA, and I never seen like a more sick nation than in United States.
Yeah.
We're so sick. Why?
And that's on purpose too. I love history because if you can understand history, you can kind of see, the patterns that kind of will form in the future. So a lot of people don't even realize this, that John D. Rockefeller was the person that actually created the Western medical system as it stands today. Yeah. And whether it was a big, screw you to the US government for breaking out Standard Oil, I mean, from a business perspective, effing brilliant.
Yeah, right.
What he did was he created an entire system where he hired a gentleman by the name of Abraham Flexner. So he created something called the Flexner Report, where this is in the 1920s, where he did a quote unquote study to show that all of the existing like homeopathic, Oriental practices, Eastern practices were all, like just crap. And that what you needed to do was diagnose a cluster of symptoms and then prescribe something to address those symptoms. But no one really knows this. And this is the brilliant part of it. Like, because you couldn't patent naturally occurring substances. So what you can patent are specific compounds, right? Synthetic compounds that address a specific, what we call indication, right? So for, let's say, diabetes or, whatever it is. And those pharmaceuticals are actually manufactured from petrochemical, which is what he had the monopoly on to begin with. So he created a brand new like industry to quote unquote help people, get better. But what also happened was, there's a massive dependency on those pharmaceuticals. So, you're speaking to how America is one of the, poorest with regards to healthcare quality, healthcare outcomes in all of the industrialized nations. I mean, out of like 12, I think we're like 11th or something like that of all the industrialized nations. We're like the very bottom. And, the challenge is, one, insurance companies are the ones that really determine a patient's care plan because it's what they will approve, not what the physician orders. Two, we have approximately, I think it's like 7 to 10% of the world's population, but we use more than 75% of the world's pharmaceutical, which is insane. If you go and sample your water, right? If you go to the sewage plant, you'll actually see a lot of the, active ingredients from pharmaceuticals in our drinking, which is insane. So, with all of that, that's a lot of the reasons why, we have, issues with, our health. And the food industry, if you look like, and this, like, being, from Europe, like your pancake mix has like 6 ingredients. Ours has like 14. The food industry is such a huge lobbying power that it's all about profit for them. It's, there's always that conflict of health versus shareholder value, right? For a public company. They're so focused on profit that they're willing to put stuff in the food that isn't as good for us as long as they're still making money. And if you look at it, the food industry is a funnel for the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry. When the USDA, so when they created the quote unquote, food pyramid, that's actually when you see a hockey stick of obesity because the very bottom of that food pyramid are carbohydrates
Yeah, white
because
carbs.
they wanted to feed more people. But the problem is, and I don't know why this isn't more common knowledge, when you eat carbohydrates, you spike your blood sugar. If you're just eating carbohydrates, because they convert very readily into blood sugar, then what occurs right afterwards is you get a very high spike in insulin. So your pancreas releases insulin is actually what shuttles blood sugar into the cell to be utilized as energy. Don't know why more people don't really know or understand is that you cannot burn fat when you have high insulin levels or an insulin-rich environment. And if you think of anybody in America, right, like they're typically waking up, they're what, going to Starbucks, they're getting a caramel macchiato, or something like that,
Yeah.
or they're going to a buffet, right? And if you take out the eggs, bacon, sausage, and the omelet and carving station, you everything available for breakfast is carbs, right? Waffles, pancakes, maple syrup, granola, cereal, danishes, muffins, fruits. So most Americans are waking up in the morning, they're spiking their blood sugar, they're spiking their insulin levels. And then the food industry brainwashes you to eat every 2 hours because if you're not consistently eating, they're not making money. So most people walk around with elevated insulin and blood sugar levels the entire time they're awake, and they wonder why there's an obesity.
Or why they're tired all the time.
Yep, because they're constantly having those sugar crashes, right? It's like spike
Mhm.
up, spike up.
Yeah.
And again, like sugar is terrible for you. Like, yeah, I mean,
Why? Tell us why sugar is terrible to us.
well, sugar just facilitates like it's fuel for it spikes insulin levels. When you have elevated, insulin levels, you become what we call insulin resistance or build type 2 diabetes. That can lead to what we call diabetic retinopathy, which is where you go blind from diabetes, diabetic neuropathy, which is where you lose circulation in your extremities and then your nerve cells die. So you got to cut off fingers, toes, hands and arms and whatnot. And then it also increases all-cause mortality as well. So cancer risk, Alzheimer's risk, cardiovascular risk, all the risks increase, when you become diabetic. So sugar really is terrible for you.
I know. It's just I will say someone that like doesn't believe this what you're saying. Try for like at least 2 weeks, like minimum 2 weeks, like really, really get rid of sugar and see how your mood and energy is going to improve. Is insane. And the sleep. What do you think about genetics versus lifestyle, especially with talking about diabetes? I read somewhere that eventually by 50, more or less every other, at least, person has some sort of like sugar issues. What do you think about that? Genetics versus lifestyle and all the diabetes situation.
Well, I think genetics is really that next frontier of personalized medicine and precision medicine because your genetics are your starting line and everyone's genetics are different. There's no two people with the exact same genetics.
Yeah.
You can look at twins, there's still certain, pieces that aren't exactly the same. So with your starting line being different, everyone has a different like cause and effect for, certain things. So for example, you have your TCF7L2 gene, which determines if you are at higher risk for diabetes. So if you have, the best optimal expression, you have, less risk for diabetes. If you have the moderate expression of it, you have a 1.5 times increase in developing diabetes. If you have the worst expression, you have a 3 times. And also, if you have a poor zinc transporter gene, which is the SLC38, I believe it is. So if you have the poor expression of a zinc transporter, you actually have higher fasting glucose levels as well. So you need to understand where your starting points are, or it's like trying to put together a piece of furniture from IKEA. It's like you got all these pieces and you're like, I have no idea what this is supposed to look like, but I'm just going to start putting together anyways. And you're like, okay, I think this is what it's supposed to look like, right? But you have some pieces left over. You're like, I'm not really sure. And that's how most people go about their lives because they've never actually looked at their own instruction manual, which is their genetics. But if you actually do a genetic test, right, where you're looking at what we call functional genomics, and there's actually something that we're implementing pretty soon called whole exome sequencing that looks at all 22,000 genes. You don't need all 22,000 genes, right? Because your hair color, your eye color all stay the same. But it's like the things that really can move the needle with regards to longevity, lifestyle, improving health span, versus just lifespan, right? Those are where the nuggets of data and information will be. So, with regards to mood and behavior, I can actually predict your personality traits just looking at your genetics.
Wow.
Because your genetics are responsible for creating your neurotransmitters, which are the raw materials that go into your emotions, which build your mood, which builds your personality. So your genetics determine how well you create those neurotransmitters, how well you transport them, how well you bind to them, and how well you clear them out. So we're able to call people out on their personality traits, based on their genetic makeup, which is, pretty, uncanny and pretty cool to do. But everything from, cardiovascular health, what their propensity for cardiovascular inflammation is, detoxification, like how well their body detoxifies, So for example, you have somebody like, who is it? Who it was Ed Burns? It was Ed, the guy that used to smoke cigars till like he was 100, right? And he never got or he lived till like 100 or whatever it was.
Mhm.
But I'm willing to bet that he had phenomenal, detoxification process in the body, especially what we call his GSTM1, which actually helps to detoxify airborne toxins. So if he's inhaling airborne toxins and he has a really great expression of that gene, right, he has lower risk of and he detoxifies those toxins, much better than somebody else. And we see it a lot of times where, like firefighters, like they'll develop lung and other very quickly if they have poor expression of those genes, because again, they're in environments where they're inhaling a lot of toxins. Especially when they're cleaning up after a fire, right? You still got that smoldering, whatever's still burning, right? And if
Yeah.
they're inhaling that,
It's just
that's all toxins that they need to clear out of their body as well.
how a person can know if they're detoxing well or not. Probably all those symptoms that we were talking about, right? Like a brain fog, like a lack of energy. How someone can start detoxing their body.
So there's three phases of detoxification. There's phase one, which is what we call the cytochrome 450 genes. What they do is they will take a very toxic substance, what we call fat soluble toxins. That's the most toxic, forms of toxins in the body. They'll convert it over to water soluble. Okay, so by doing that, that actually lowers the toxicity levels of the toxin. Then phase two, there's four different parts of phase two detoxification. There's glutathionization, methylation, antioxidation, and glucuronidation. So those are all just different pathways in which the body helps to basically bind those toxins and brings them to a specific place to be excreted out of the body in phase three, which is a physical excretion of the toxin through the urine, feces, or bile. So what you want to do is you want to support those processes as best you can. And by understanding what your genetic expression is for each parts of those, then you can figure out the ones that you do really well, right? And then the ones you don't, and then you want to support the ones that you don't, obviously, to ensure that your body's detoxifying as best it can. But unless you actually test, right? In our philosophy is test, don't guess. I mean, yeah, you can just quote unquote preemptively do it, but if you're not sure, then why do it, right? Your body should be the one kind of informing us on the best path, because your body's infinitely intelligent. It's going to tell us exactly what path we need to take, as long as you know what questions to ask it, and obviously how to interpret the data that it provides back. So what we do is everything's quantifiable. There's no guessing. Your body tells us exactly what we need to do.
Okay, so we need to test. I agree with the testing. How do you guys do when someone is really, really sick and this person is just really on a budget and they don't have much finances to invest? Maybe let's say 2,000. What you can do for 2,000 in your lab?
So, for example, our blood labs, we run over 54 different biomarkers. We look at everything from your immune function to your oxygen carrying capacity. We look at all your sex hormones. We look at your cardiovascular health. We look at your different organ functions, such as liver, gallbladder, kidneys, thyroid. We look at all your sex hormones. We look at your vitamin levels, such as B12, B9, and D3. So we get a pretty deep dive, like just with our base blood test. And if you were to run to LabCorp and try to run that same panel by yourself, it costs you over $3,000 to run it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we obviously have a much better relationship with LabCorp. So we pass on that savings to our patients. So that includes the cost of labs. That includes access to LEAP, which is the Lab Education Advocacy Platform. So if somebody has questions about their lab results, they can always just refer back to there, look at the videos, the frequently asked questions. We also have a lab review where, we spend some time together to go through those results and really identify the things that are urgent issues that you need to address immediately, and the suboptimal ones as well. It's all, included in the $399. With regards to, answering your specific question, it really depends on what that person's experiencing too. Like, when they're not feeling well, what does that mean, right? Is it brain fog? Is it something easy where it's just like, hey, we just need to optimize something? Or is it an underlying medical condition where they really need to, fix whatever's, wrong? Because, we focus more on the optimization of the body. We're not looking to cure underlying medical conditions because, again, we know what our forte is. We let the professionals handle that part of it. So, if, let's say, for example, we've actually helped identify early stage in some of our patients, specifically like prostate in some of our patients, where we say, hey, listen, your prostate specific antigen is elevated. Highly recommend you go to a urologist to get it checked out. Better safe than sorry. And multiple times, gotten calls back and said, listen, if it wasn't for you telling us to go to our urologist and get tested, we never would have caught this. He's like, I never would have caught it. I would have died from it.
Wow.
we were able to identify in the early stages, prostate these individuals. We always work with the traditional allopathic disciplines, and we still use pharmaceuticals. Like, we try not to. Like, we try to use the most conservative approach first. If we can use a diet or exercise or lifestyle first, great. But some people will still need that pharmaceutical intervention.
What is your daily, like a weekly routine, including nutrition, lifestyle, exercising?
I always believe in being, highly congruent with what it is that, you're quote unquote selling. So, I mean, I literally, I live it. Like, I walk the walk and I talk the talk as well. So, every single morning I'm fasting. So I do 16 hours off, 8 hours on. So I, skip breakfast every single day. So that helps me get into ketosis in the morning. I, typically eat very, very like nutrient dense foods. So I avoid like ever shopping in, the middle of the supermarkets, because that's where all of your processed foods are. I always stay on the outside of the supermarket because that's where all your whole foods are. The meat, the dairy, everything's, all on the outsides versus, and then, I, take everything I can to, optimize my body. So, I'm on HRT. I take metformin twice a day to, help lower my blood sugar and also, help maintain my insulin sensitivity. I do blood tests at least, twice a year to see where I'm at. So I'm always tweaking, right, to make sure that, I'm optimized as well.
Okay. Do you exercise? How often?
I try to get in the gym at least 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah, just depending on schedule. Like, for example, I just got back from New York City yesterday, and I was able to work out a few times while I was there, which is nice. That's great. But sometimes if I'm traveling and it's crazy, like, I can't get it in, right? And I try to at minimum get twice a week, if not. But, if I can get to 4 or 5, that's where I like to be.
Okay. Any biohacking tricks that you do, like any tools, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I got a ton of them. What it's for. So, okay, so specifically for what?
For health, longevity.
For health longevity. So, for example, I love NAD. NAD is amazing. I mean, it helps so much with cognitive function, energy, gives you a deeper reservoir of energy to pull from. It's what actually facilitates, electron and energy transfer and mitochondrial function, repairing DNA, lowering inflammation, even, lengthening your telomeres or lowering your biological age as well. So, I mean, NAD is amazing. I have all these different devices that I'll always just buy just to try it out. So I've got, multiple vagus nerve stimulators to help get out of, sympathetic or fight or flight. So one's called Pulsetto, the other one's called Roga. I'm getting another one called NeuroSym pretty soon. I have a headband. It's a photobiomodulation device, which helps with bringing more blood flow to the brain. So I use it when I'm meditating as well, so that, it seems to work extremely well. Yeah, red light therapy. I use, cold therapy as well, breath work, meditation, as long as it has the scientific backing, and I can identify the pathway, like, hey, this is the scientific pathway or, the metabolic pathway in which it works in the body, then hell, I'm willing to try just about anything.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know.
I know that, not everything is going to work for every single person. So, you need to identify what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, and what is the goal for someone? Let's talk a little bit about, since a lot of our clients, like viewers, are into anti-aging, specifically, let's say, skin aging. Could you recommend women, particularly, what they could do, improve in their life to actually slow down a physical aging of their skin?
Yeah, absolutely. So your skin is literally a representation of what's going on the inside. So, they say beauty's only skin deep. That's true in a sense, because if, your body's not detoxifying properly, if, let's say, you have high cortisol levels, if you're stressed out all the time, it's going to show up in your skin, right? So adopting the specific things that will help to, obviously lower cortisol, to detoxify properly. There's a ton of, products out there. Like, I use GHKCU, like copper peptides for my skin. I'll use rapamycin for my skin as well. I use, peptides such as samorelin, tesamorelin, ipamorelin to help with, collagen production, recovery. I use, exosome therapy as well. I haven't done the microneedling as of late, but, I'll do like exosome IVs and use exosomes for, microneedling or PR or platelet-rich plasma as well. So, I mean, there's a whole host of different things that you can do.
How do you know about exosomes? How do you know where to get like really clean, the best quality exosomes? Because like, how do you know?
Most of them are pretty close. It's all the same. You're all deriving it from either placental tissue or, some sort of cord blood or whatever it is. And, it has to go through the same sanitization process as well, because, you got to make sure that, you have a high quality donor, that, they're young, they don't have any obviously diseases. So doing all of the screening, the pre-screening before, they accept it. But then, there's a sanitization process. And like in the US, you can't get more than 10 million mesenchymal stem cells in a dose. Whereas, in other countries you can. But the exosomes are actually just signaling packets that come off the mesenchymal stem cell. And that's actually what helps to signal the body to heal itself. Exosomes can actually pass the blood-brain barrier as well, versus the mesenchymal stem cell can't. The exosomes are going to be, a little more powerful. So, for example, I had a really close friend of mine. He was, I think, late 40s, like 47. This is about a few years ago. He'd actually had a stroke, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, I just had a stroke, bro." And I was like, "Oh shit!" I'm like, "That's not good." And when I saw him, so it was in January of that year, and by the time I saw him in April, because he was in rehab and whatnot, and obviously we couldn't go see him in rehab and do what we wanted to do because they would have arrested me, right? Because they're like, "You're doing what?" Right? So we had to wait till he came out. 3 months or 2 to 3 months had elapsed. And when I saw him, his entire left side was paralyzed. So, he was lisping because, like he couldn't control his, mouth. So he was lisping. He had no control of his left arm or left hand. And he lost his normal gait because he had to swing his left leg around. So he had to relearn how to walk as well. And I was like, okay, well, whenever you can, let's get an exosome IV in you as quickly as possible. So we did one infusion, for him in April. And by, I want to say November, like when I saw him again, you can even tell he had a stroke. Had full use of his left hand and his left arm again, was walking normally. Yeah, you can't even tell, he had a stroke.
Wow.
Because again, it's what helps to repair, the synapses, and the tissue that's damaged.
How often are you getting exosome IV? It's IV, right? What are you getting?
Yeah. Not recommending IVs as often as I used to, because now they're starting to find that there's exponential increase in serum microplastics level in the blood before versus after IVs. Because if you think about what an IV is, it's saline solution in a plastic bag that's been sitting there for God knows how long. And then the IV administration set is also plastic. So you're getting a huge infusion of microplastics in the blood after an IV. So now it's just like, well, unless there's a really, really, really good reason to do an IV, I'm not doing it. Especially for me, through my health issue, one of the things that they caught was calcification of my coronary arteries as well. And at the time I was 44. And so I went to a cardiologist after I recovered, and they ordered a CT angiogram. So they looked at the calcium score. You should be at 0, which means you have no calcification whatsoever. Optimally, you should be under 100. I was at 434, which is extremely high, which just was completely shocking to me because I thought I was doing everything I could to obviously optimize my health and my wellness, right? So I was like, how the hell did that happen? And then, when I started diving into it, I started to realize that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer in the world. One person every 34 seconds dies of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
And I was like, why the hell is it so prevalent? And then when I started digging more into it, I started to realize that no one really understands the pathway in which it's created. And everyone's like, oh, it's LDL cholesterol. It's high LDL cholesterol. Well, I've seen people with high LDL cholesterol and they have zero calcification whatsoever. So it's not a direct, causation, of high LDL cholesterol. What it really is, when people run in fight or flight too much, right, it increases their adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol levels, which creates inflammation in the body. And it's that LDL cholesterol that will seek out that inflammation and put it out. If everything works perfectly, great, the inflammation disappears. But if that LDL cholesterol meets a toxin or oxidizes for any reason, that's where it creates plaque. And if you create plaque in one area, then it increases, obviously, and then it closes the opening, blood pressure rises, increase of heart attack and stroke. You have to address it, from a holistic and comprehensive perspective, where normal doctors will just prescribe a statin without even looking at your genetics to see if you can actually properly metabolize statins. So I've actually had 2 genetic tests done. One, I know it's your SLC1B1 gene, which looks at your statin metabolism. I'm a normal statin metabolizer. I've also had another test done called pharmacogenomics, or PGX, that looks at over 275 pharmaceutical compounds and how my genetics or your genetics would metabolize certain pharmaceutical compounds. So I also know, I'm double confirmed that I can metabolize statins normally. I'm on the most powerful statin, rosuvastatin 40, that blocks my liver from creating cholesterol at night. I'm on Zetia 10 milligrams in the morning, which blocks me from absorbing cholesterol from my diet. But I also implement all this with regards to breath work, meditation, using vagus nerve stimulators, taking something to lower my cortisol response, taking astaxanthin, which helps to lower inflammation and oxidation, and also helps with expressing your longevity gene as well. I take things to boost my nitric oxide production, which is the compound that helps to keep the endothelium lining flexible and pliable. And then I also try to avoid microplastics as well. because microplastics are now a compound or component of plaque that they're finding. So I literally have to, be as aggressive as possible to ensure that the progression of the disease doesn't continue, and obviously try to even reverse it.
Nitric oxide is amazing. I had Dr. Nathan Bryan on my podcast as well. I take
Dr. Nathan, I love Dr. Nathan.
Yeah, I take his nitric oxide every day. Every day, and we are like official reseller on my website as well. He's really cool. How do you think? Like, first question: how can we filter those microplastics? Is there any way to filter from an IV? There's no such thing as a filters, right?
So there's actually something called a apheresis. So it's a very, very expensive procedure. In the UK, it's like 25 grand. Here, I think it's like 15 grand if you can find it. But they will actually filter out the blood. They'll take your blood out and then filter it out.
Oh, wow.
But again, that's expensive and not as readily available for most people. So you want to support your detoxification processes and also minimize your intake as best you can. And again, I'm not home right now, so I'm using a plastic bottle, which is not ideal. But normally when I'm home, I'll take my Kangen, alkaline water machine, I'll put it in a zero water filter that will filter out the PFOS, microplastics, the contaminants, and I'll put it in a glass bottle. Yeah. And I'll just drink out of glass bottles when I'm at home. When I'm traveling, and normally what I do is I travel with, it's called the Life Straw Go series. Mm-hmm. So it's got a little filter that's a straw that will filter out microplastics and contaminants. So let's say I was traveling, I would put this, this bottle in there, and then I would drink out of that, because then it would at least minimize the microplastic, intake, from this, because 1 liter bottle of water has approximately 200,000 microplastics in it.
Holy smokes! Wow.
It's huge. And, I think infertility, because we've seen a huge drop increase in infertility since like the 1970s in all industrialized nations.
And our clothes, like what we wear every single day, polyester, and it's plastic, it's rubbing against our skin like all the time. Wow. I'm going to post like all the links that you're talking about down below in the description box, so people can check out, and do the lab work with you, or ask you any questions. Going to put your email and all the information. But someone just a beginner, don't know nothing at all, where can they slowly begin with being a little bit healthier than they were last year?
It all starts with just making better decisions and being consistent. That's really what it is at the end of the day. It's, everyone wants that literally magic fix, right? And that's why everyone's loving the GLP-1s, like the semaglutides, the tirzepatides and whatnot, because people are lazy. I hate to say it, right? If you can just make better decisions on a daily basis of what you're putting into your body, that's going to help tremendously. And, one poignant discussion that I had with one of my associates, he's actually a fire teamer as well, Tony Robbins, and he's also a registered dietitian nutritionist, and he works with a lot of rehab facilities. Mm-hmm. And him and I were at lunch one day, and I was like, "Hey, what's one of the most poignant things that you tell your patients that you see?" And he thought about it for a second. He's like, "You know what?" He's like, "I tell all my patients that there shouldn't be any type of emotional, positive or negative connotation with food. At the end of the day, food is just fuel. And if you're looking to fly fast like a jet, you got to make sure that you're fueling your body with jet fuel, right? But if you're trying to fly a jet, right, and you're using 87 gas, your engine's going to explode."
Yeah.
Right? So, if you want the best out of your body, you have to fuel it properly. You have to let it recover properly, right? So, you really do need to listen to your body. If you're feeling tired, go take a nap. If you're hungry, go eat something that's going to fuel your body properly, versus some high in sugar or processed or whatever it may be.
Yeah, nice. Where can people find you?
So, our website is number 4 BPM, BPM.com. Yeah, that's where they can reach us.
Do you have any social media platforms?
Yeah, so IG is 4bpm.official.
What do you want to be known after you leave this planet?
That I was able to help people. Everything that I do is filtered through how can I deliver more value, how can I help more people, and how can I be of service. That's what I always, filter everything that I do through. If I can, help people make better decisions about their health and wellness. Interestingly enough, you were talking about how you went through, your pregnancy, and you really didn't have a platform to be able to refer to, right, to get the experience of other people that have gone through what you've gone through, right, or that's gone through it before you have. One of the things I'm building into Leap is a community, kind of like Quora, where people can share their experiences that they've had from, through their own experience, or if they've been a caretaker for somebody, that's close to them, to be able to share some of the things that they wish they would have known before they went through their, experience and journey. Because how powerful would it be to be able to have one place you could go to where if you, like, let's say, God forbid, had right, a certain type of, and there was a whole host of people that gave their experience, like, hey, these are the 10 things I wish I would have known, or the questions I would have asked before going through this experience, or if I would, if I'm going to go through it again, here's what I wish I would have known. We're building a community, to really kind of crowd educate people, because the people that have gone through it already are the people that have the most valuable information. And if we can, get everyone to curate, and to share that, information and data, I think it's going to help, millions and millions of people.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate you.